Now, I don't want to get into this because it's gossipy. I really don't give a shit who Jeff Zucker was porking. I couldn't care less. Couldn't care less about his partner either. Obviously it was a consensual relationship, according to both of them. And since it was a consensual relationship, call me a sexist, but I don't quite understand why it's such a horrible deal. These are adults. These are adults over 40 or 50, aren't they? These are fully formed adults, and they decided to have a sexual affair. And that's why Zucker resigned, stepped down as CNN's president after 9 years. He did his damage when he was at NBC. I don't like Jeff Zucker. I don't like him. And Zucker, you have to understand this. Well, come on, Mike, don't sound like somebody's fourth grade teacher. This is easily understood. Zucker, probably as much as any other person in the world, created and polished up the orange vomits persona, Donald Trump. First as a reality TV star over at NBC, who then, because of the way he was treated by NBC, morphed into a worldwide celebrity, and then as a candidate for president who was given large amounts of free publicity. I remember when Morning Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, when they got married, didn't they get married with Trump in attendance? Didn't they go to Mar-a-Lago for a New Year's Eve party? I mean, the media sucked up to him, and you know why. Of course you know why, and Zucker admitted it. Because Trump, the vile fucking snake bastard that he is, garnered ratings, advertising dollars. And that's all these people care about. Take a look at Fox. So the question being asked by one of the columnists at the Washington Post, here's the question. Was his ouster, Zucker's, really all about his failure to disclose to his corporate bosses a consensual relationship with another top network executive? Another question would be how much of a factor was the continuing mess over former host Chris Cuomo's firing in December. And you remember what Cuomo was fired for talking with his goddamn brother, the governor of New York, about how to manage the horrible publicity that his brother was getting. And so they fired him. And then the question, to what extent were CNN's dropping ratings part of the calculation to get rid of Zucker? You know, in media, whether it's radio or television, that's all that matters. That's why you can have filth and pigs and scum and Nazis like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and the rest of the people on this filthy Fox sewer, and then over on Onan News and the rest of them. That's why they're still there. First of all, they are being managed by Nazis. Nazis, not fascists, Nazis. And they're bringing in money. Because Nazism / fascism has always been 1 inch deep in the soil of this country. We all know that. So all of this shit will be revealed eventually, right? Because teams of reporters are scrambling to dig into one of the biggest media stories in a long time, right? But as Margaret Sullivan, writing at the Post, says, we already know one thing. When the dust settles, Zucker's relationship with Donald Trump will define Zucker's legacy. Abso-damn-lutely. So the so-called through line that goes through this story, Zucker's story, there is nothing about the storyline that is more complicated than TV ratings. Those were always Zucker's guiding light, and they should have been. I mean, that's what he does, right? That's why he got paid millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, tens of millions. Bring in the eyeballs. Bring them in, Jeff. And he did. Those ratings were always the guiding light for Zucker and, by the way, anybody else in a management position or a network head position in television and radio. But it was also, ultimately, his fatal flaw. I'll explain. 20 years ago, when he was an NBC executive looking for a way to bring up that network's dropping popularity, he gave the okay to a new show, a reality show called The Apprentice. And the star of that show, of course, it's all history now, but you know he was this flashy prick whose soon-to-be famous tagline was, "You're fired." And even when Zucker put this scum bastard to work, Zucker knew, and Zucker's a Jew, and he knew that Trump had a horrible anti-Semitic attitude, a racist attitude. He knew that Trump had this awful history of bankruptcies, racism, anti-Semitism, failed real estate projects. But because the Orange Vomit could talk like a motherfucker, boy, he could talk his way out of anything, that made him unnatural on television. Even though what the Orange Vomit says, if you ever listen to him, is gibberish. Incoherent sentences, phrases, sentence fragments. I don't think Trump in his entire useless life has ever talked in paragraphs, has he? Of course not. Washington Post journalists Mark Fisher and Michael Kranish wrote a book in 2016 entitled Trump Revealed: The Stunning Rise of Donald Trump. Trump Revealed. And they said this, quote, "The show was built as a virtually nonstop advertisement for the Trump empire and lifestyle." The Trump empire and lifestyle. And we have come to learn that most of the Trump empire was just his fucking name up on buildings to which he sold the rights. Zucker created Trump, the TV sensation, when he was at NBC, which was the absolutely necessary foundation for Trump, the candidate, right? And according to the Washington Post, after moving from NBC to CNN years later, Zucker recollected very well that Trump was a self-proclaimed ratings machine. And even Zucker said at the time it was a rare instance of Trump telling the truth. I never watched that show. Did you? I don't know. I mean, I'm very familiar with the tagline, "You're fired." But I remember seeing little bits and pieces of people sitting there with the terrible whipped dog look on their face around a table with Trump and sweating and upset, and then Trump unleashing his tagline, "You're fired." Oh, Jesus. But when Zucker came to CNN, I used to scream about this. CNN took his campaign speeches live. If you remember when I was doing talk radio, if you were listening then, 6, 7 years ago, I used to just lose my shit about why is CNN taking this live? And sometimes they went so far as to broadcast images of an empty lectern waiting for this orange scum to show up, and they would have a chyron underneath the bottom of the picture that said, quote, "Breaking news, standing by for Trump to speak." Here's the truth. You can't buy that kind of media. It came from Jeff Zucker, strictly, solely, exclusively. And in addition to that, Zucker also, and wait, let me stop for a second. The reason I'm bringing this up, there's an object lesson here. There is a lesson that is enfolded in this story of Jeff Zucker's rise and fall. And it has nothing to do, in my opinion, with his consensual affair with a woman who was just about on the same executive level as he was, maybe a step down, but this is not somebody in the secretary pool. You understand what I'm saying? But there is something to be learned here. Zucker brought on the air Trump surrogates That whole stable of weaselly little bastards who should have had no place on a national news network. These scum belonged on the Fox sewer. People like Corey Lewandowski, remember him? Or the sycophant Jeffrey Lord, who praised Trump as the Martin Luther King of healthcare. You remember this stuff? Kayleigh McEnany, who later became a White House press secretary, bad enough to somehow make some of us wish that Sean Spicer was back. Remember Sean Spicer, that poor miserable fuck? Oh my God. Only the best people. Only the best people. So when the Orange Vomit became the Republican nominee for president and started trashing Zucker's baby, CNN, and staff, and saying that they were about fake news, it was too late. Too late. By then, the standard had been set. And as the Post puts it, every Trump utterance became breaking news, and CNN, like many other news organizations, never figured out how to responsibly cover Trump throughout his democracy-damaging presidency. And then Zucker expressed what I guess this was supposed to be some kind of a regret on Zucker's part. But he said this in 2016. He said, quote, "If we made any mistake last year, it's that we probably did put on too many of his campaign rallies in those early months and let them run." End quote. But he comes right back after saying that, right back, and tries to rationalize it. He excused his decision-making regarding Trump by saying, quote, "You never knew what he would say," end quote. And audiences were riveted, just like they would be at a massive hog butchering, right? They were riveted. So what could he do? That was his excuse. So many media outlets said that about Trump, or will say that in the future, or say it now. Well, if we didn't put it on the air, somebody else would, and then we'll lose the eyeballs. Yeah. And then the Post has this. The same motivation cropped up in 2020, early in the pandemic, when CNN's primetime star, Chris Cuomo, was driving audience numbers up via his cozy chats with his older brother, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. That was an unwise break with the policy that had been in place since the younger Cuomo arrived from ABC News. And that was, the rule was, he, Chris, would not be allowed to cover his politician brother. But again, how could Jeff Zucker say no to the ratings that Chris was bringing in, that Chris Cuomo, the younger, was bringing in? How could he say no? You know, when you're in television, on that level of management, you don't give a rat's ass. No, you really don't. Trust me. I know. You don't give a rat's ass this crop, this current crop, or the past 20, 30 years. You don't care what you put on the air. You try to stay within the standards and practices parameters put out there by the Federal Communications Commission, but you don't care. And that's what Jeff Zucker personified. I don't care. I don't give a shit. It's bringing eyeballs to the network. It's driving up our revenue, our ad revenue. So I don't care. So how could Zucker say no to those ratings? He couldn't. But his decisions about young Master Chris Cuomo and the animalistic pig Donald Trump have all backfired on him. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.